The idea of offering custom software development to your clients might be the worst thing you've ever heard, because that means managing expectations, crazy complicated development plans, and of course, developers. But my special guest today believes you have to, and not just as a profit center, but as a client retention strategy. Hey, I'm Paul Green, and don't forget, for help finding new clients for your MSP, we've created an easy-to-follow marketing system. Get that and all the content to go in it at MSPmarketingedge.com. Today's guest believes your clients see software development just like they see websites. To them, it's all just technology, and they would rather buy it from you. But if they can't, maybe they'll go somewhere else for it.
Hi, I'm George Toursoulopoulos, CEO of Synetec.
And George, thanks for coming onto the podcast. You are perhaps the best example of why I always ask our guests to introduce themselves, so I never have to learn how to pronounce difficult surnames. It's a delight to have you on here. You were recommended by 2 or 3 separate people to come on and talk about a very interesting subject: why MSPs should offer software development. So we're going to be exploring that in just a few minutes' time, and I know that you believe very strongly that for client retention reasons, every MSP should be offering software development. Let's first of all just go back a first few steps and let's learn a little bit about you. So tell us what you do now, but more importantly, how did you get into software development?
To me, that's a great question. I mean, I've always been in software development, so studied it. So my background is in that. But I suppose what's been interesting is I've worked for clients and then found what was being done in terms of how they could get it right, how they could get it wrong. So it was always a natural progression to start my own company and help them get it right, so to speak.
And obviously you're running your own software development company now. Is this something you've always done, or have you worked for other people doing the same thing?
So I did, when I first got out of uni, I was working for quite a big outsourcing company from the States, EDS, for quite a few years. I sort of learned my trade there, so to speak. And then I founded a company actually over in South Africa, which I sold and came over to the UK. And after a couple of years consulting, I started up Synetec. So that was in 2009. So we've been running for about 15 years now.
And over those 15 years, of course, the whole concept of software development is completely different, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's changed. It's been huge. I mean, the way development is done and how companies are comfortable doing development themselves. And not to mention COVID, COVID made a massive difference in terms of working remotely and how comfortable people were with that. So we've had a couple of almost little industrial revolutions within the software development business over the last 15 years.
I bet you have. And just before we talk about how MSPs should be using software development, as you look at the rise of the AI models and things like no-code coding, both of which are concepts I don't really understand a huge amount about, but I do read about them, as I'm sure lots of ordinary business owners do. How do you see software development changing over the next 15 years or so?
I think everyone's talking about AI, right? I mean, that's almost, I wouldn't say a given, but it's obviously very exciting. The precursor is the data, though. So the interesting thing is there's a ton of work that has to be done structuring and cleaning up that data. And one of the interesting things is everyone wants clean data, but no one wants to pay for it. So I think that's a massive blocker. We got to figure out how to be able to do that properly before then, the AI adoption is really going to get, grow and sort of, pick up pace.
Yes, I think that's a fair thing to say. So let's look now at MSPs and software development, and they're not really two things that a number of years ago I would have put together. But you're not just the first person. You're one of a growing number of people that have said to me, actually, these days we believe that software development is a service that MSPs should be offering. Can you give us some examples of why it's so important for MSPs to at least be able to have those conversations with their clients?
It's definitely something that's changing and becoming more intense over the last year, certainly. I mean, so for us, we work closely with quite a number of MSPs, and we've had a couple of times where clients have left their MSP, even though the MSP is doing really well in different ways and really giving them great service, but leaving them because the need that they have that crosses over to where they see the MSP should be offering those services. The MSP is saying, no, we don't do that. And then what happens is the client then says, well, I'm going to go somewhere where I'm going to be serviced. So I have seen, and so I think that, I mean, if you were going to say as a business owner, I'd say that's the number one reason for us to do anything, isn't it? Client retention. How much more easy is it to retain a client than to get a new one? So, we've got to be able to look after our clients. I think that's something that's really on the increase. I understand why that is, but the point is it's definitely on the increase.
So I imagine from the ordinary business owner or manager's point of view, they see software development as an IT thing. And I'm putting that in kind of little speech marks, in the same way that they probably see their website as an IT thing. We, of course, know that websites and tech support and cybersecurity and software development are all completely different areas. And from the MSPs that you're working with, when they first start talking to you about offering software development, are they nervous because they don't see it as something within their skill set?
Yeah, they're very much so. And I think the challenge with software development is it often gets a bad rap because it can be badly done. And I think anything that's service orientated, I mean, look at the building industry. How many people actually say, I've got a great build, that everything was on time and on budget. It was wonderful. So I think software development falls into that because the requirements aren't sort of static and clear up front. So I think MSPs generally have had two main concerns. Number one is we don't want a happy customer turning into an unhappy customer. Potentially there's risk there. And B, we don't really know how to do it. It's a completely different business line. I think that kind of sums it up for me. But I think the bigger challenge that almost overrides those is that the crossover between development and infrastructure is so big that you cannot properly support a client if you don't know what they're going to do with that infrastructure when it comes to the development. And I think fundamentally, for companies that are perhaps underskilled with the not just plain software development, but with the sort of the DevOps roles around the development team, what then happens is something that a MSP is provisioned for a customer is now sort of bundled under them. So they go, well, we got this stuff off you. We're not using it. We're not using it well. We're wasting money. This is your fault. Or we need this, and now you can't do it for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And when we're talking about development, are we talking about you as the MSP, whether you do it in-house or whether you outsource it to a company such as yours? Are we talking about taking bespoke development that they've had done elsewhere, perhaps some kind of legacy application they've had built? Or are we talking about brand new development, or is it a bit of a mix of both?
I think it's a mix of both. When clients appear to be a lot of new MSPs get new clients by a client turning around and saying, okay, we're going to move from on-prem, let's say, to public cloud. That's a typical entry point from my conversations with the companies we work with. And at that point, if there's any bespoke applications, one of the key parts of that migration or concerns is going to be how are we going to migrate this onto the public cloud from our on-prem servers. Typically speaking, the MSP will say, well, we'll give you the infrastructure, you sort that out. So it's a differentiator when winning business, completely new clients. That's the one side. When they're an existing client, you have a position of trust, almost a trusted advisor, which is fantastic. That's the position you want to be in, so you can really help them, look after them. So when they need something brand new, like you just mentioned, they want to know, like, who do you recommend for this? You want to be able to give a good recommendation if you can't do it yourself, or you want to have a good partner, so you keep that in your ecosystem. Alternatively, if they have something internally and they perhaps have their own development function, typically speaking, I'm not talking about the very large institutions. I'm, let's say, talking about a company that has, let's say, less than 50 developers. So a medium-sized to small-sized enterprise, they're going to be missing key skill sets. And specifically, if they're giving the MSP the infrastructure support role, they will be missing those roles that stereotypically used to work within the development team to help them give the development team what they have. So that gap is there now.
And that's obviously an opportunity there to fill that gap. George, final question for you. Tell us about either the biggest headache or the worst project or the oldest legacy code you've worked on, or some kind of funny story from your career of something that you looked at initially and thought, oh, we're never going to be able to cope with this.
Funny, reduce you to tears or laughter. You have to pick one or the other there. No, I think typically speaking, we've we've actually got a client that has undergone quite a large project transformation where they used to have 4 or 5 different PCs all connecting to this main server, all running these separate applications that were then pumping data into the main database. And these guys were running an absolute fortune in terms of, it was a hedge fund that was running a huge amount of money. And if one of these PCs were ever switched off, the whole thing would just break. And one day, apparently, the cleaner came in and one of the PCs was unplugged, so everything didn't work the next day. I mean, funny, but also really concerning. Anyway, we helped them transform and get away from that kind of environment. But the stories you see like that and how much, sometimes sticky tape and wires holding everything together is quite amusing.
Yeah, and it does make you wonder how many more of those situations are still out there, just waiting for someone to come along and take it, fix it, and do it before the cleaner switches everything off. Tell us a little bit about Synetec. What do you do for MSPs, and what's the best way to get in touch with you, George?
So we work with MSPs to help them fill that gap in infrastructure. So we help them service their clients. When they have a development function, we help them procure the infrastructure that they need, but also set it up correctly and make that part of their internal processes. So we fill that gap between the MSPs and the internal development teams. We also help them when it comes to data, management of data, structuring of data, and putting data lakes and databases together. So we have quite a good and a good relationship with multiple MSPs that we can help in that way. And the best way to get hold of me is just email me, gtours@synetec.co.uk, or you can go onto our website, synetec.co.uk, or just message me on LinkedIn.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Edge.